Hello everyone, welcome to Friday, March 5th, 2021. Well, here we are at Friday again, and we're starting off this Friday with high pressure coming back into the region after yesterday's small little storm that rolled through Utah, Colorado, and Kansas, bringing some really beneficial moisture to parts of eastern Colorado and western Kansas. Really needed it out there on the plains. Some areas up to a half of an inch of rain and wet snow yesterday, but now we're going to go back the springtime weather again. It is going to just be fabulous for the next 5 days through Tuesday, folks. We are going to be looking at unseasonably warm temperatures. There will be some areas of western Nebraska, western Kansas, eastern Colorado that could eclipse 70 this weekend and into early next week. So be ready for some real spring-like weather. If you haven't gotten spring fever yet, you're going to get it. Now, colder and unsettled weather starts to return late Tuesday of next week and into the following weekend. Definitely things change by the middle to the end of next week. We can't keep this weather forever. We don't want to. We need moisture. You got to get it colder if you're going to get moisture. But if you want to be outside or if you need to travel, here's a really good opportunity coming up. Long-term pattern, lots of question marks. We expect that. Really, why I say this is when you get your 10-day forecast on your phone and you look out at some long-range forecast, really don't go past 5 days, because after 5 days, your long-range forecasts are worthless right now. Now, we're going to talk about the winter of 78, 79. Yesterday, when we reviewed what happened during the blizzard of 49, I got a lot of emails and a lot of messages on YouTube yesterday from folks going, hey, what about this winter? What about this winter? Well, a lot of folks asked about the winter of 78 and 79. What was that like? Any similarities to this past winter in the blizzard of 49? We'll take a look at that. Now, next week, I want to just give you a teaser. Next week, we're going to update our long-range forecast for the spring and summer 2021. We have a lot of new model data that's come in from the long-range charts that we'll take a look at this upcoming spring and summer. This is going to be an important one with the dry 2020 we had, to see what's happening and what's coming in 2021. This is what's going to be developing today, and you can just recognize by looking at the shape of the jet stream flow. A big ridge of high pressure is building in behind the little low that came through the area yesterday. By this afternoon, it's all the way into Arkansas. So what will happen is this will draw up warmer air from the desert states right into the high plains and interior west as we go into today and the weekend. That's why temperatures are just going to rebound very, very quickly. And you can see, if you were to look at these little black lines here, we call these wind barbs. These wind barbs show us how fast the winds are at 18,000 feet, as well as the direction the winds are coming from. So if you were to look here in western Utah, you can see that the wind is coming from the southwest. Each long line is worth 10 knots. The smaller line, shorter one, is worth 5. So that means it's from the southwest at 15 miles an hour at 18,000 feet, while the winds over eastern Colorado today are going to be from the north at 20. So if you wondered what those wind barbs mean, that's what they represent. If you notice on this map, we got a lot of blue up here in northeastern Canada, Maine, lots of cold up there. We've got this vortex of really cold air just north of Alaska. This is going to be a troublemaker as we go into the middle to the end of March, and that's why we're saying enjoy this weather that we've got now. But this pattern is going to hold through the weekend. We have a little system that'll go over Yellowstone Park, northwestern Wyoming, and into Montana during the day Saturday. It'll make it a little windy on the plains, but it's not going to be much of a weather maker other than some snow showers in the mountains. Going further out, this is by Monday. We have a bigger consolidated upper level low right now forming off the coast of British Columbia. Notice too, we've got a little tail of some colder air up here in Canada. So what'll happen is this will slide in like this. There's going to be a push of colder air like this, all kind of coming together during the middle to the end of next week. And there it is. This tail of colder air will drag in a cold front. So colder air will be pouring in by Tuesday night, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. At the same time, this low off the west coast will be pumping in Pacific moisture. So we're going to have some weather in this area here by the middle to the end of next week. Weather meaning colder temperatures, clouds, and some rain and snow. After that, a lot, and I mean a lot of disagreement in our long-range charts. We'll take a closer look at the longer-term forecast with Monday's podcast. One thing I want to highlight to you is one reason why we think it's going to get stormy during the second half of March into April. We talk about these oscillations sometimes. Now, right now, the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, which basically is just a representation of how many low pressure systems are going to be moving across the North Pacific and into the North American continent in the coming weeks. Notice we go into a negative and a positive phase. There's a lot of up and downs here, a lot of gyrations. You expect that as you go deeper into March and into early April. Anytime we go into this negative phase of the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, we tend to have low pressure systems coming through the western United States. So you can see we've got these dips right here, multiple dips. We have a big rise and a big drop as we get into April, especially right after the 1st of April. So there's more stormy weather to come. So don't think that this current pattern that we're in now is any indication how the rest of March and April and May will go. That's not going to be the case. Now, what did the winter of 78, 79 look like? A lot of folks emailed and said that was a brutal winter. They remember that winter in the Rocky Mountain West and the Western High Plains. Well, let's take a look at the upper level pattern. There was one notable Arctic outbreak and one big storm that happened right on the New Year's Day timeframe. Isn't that interesting? We had in 1979 an Arctic blast around New Year's. Well, the blizzard of 49 was on January 2nd, exactly 30 years later. And so when we go back and look at the winter of 78, 79, this was the highlight. We had extreme cold. And notice the patterns. Always want to show you what the patterns are like as they do repeat themselves. We had a high pressure ridge building up along the west coast, a high pressure ridge in the east, kind of acting like bookends. And so the Arctic air had nowhere to go but to go south into the region. And if we were to look at the temperature anomaly for the time frame of December 30th through the 1st of January 1979, you can see the extent of the bitter, bitter cold air that came into the northern, central, and northwestern areas of the United States, as well as western areas of Canada. Now, this begs the question, well, what was it like in 1979 in terms of the sea surface temperatures and conditions? Well, interestingly enough, here's another graphic showing what the coldest temperatures were. And you can see they were centered over northern Wyoming, Montana, up into parts of British Columbia, and Alberta, and Saskatchewan. But the very cold air got all the way into California, got deep into Texas again, and was definitely focused into the western areas of the United States. So getting back to what the sea surface temperatures were, you're probably going, well, was it an El Nino? Was it a La Nina? It was a La Nina. The sea surface temperature anomalies in the Pacific were cold near those equator regions again. So a lot of folks are saying, well, 78, 79, well, that was bitterly cold and there was a lot of snow, kind of like the blizzard of 49. Well, here again, we have patterns that repeat themselves. And what's interesting is that 1979 was a La Nina just like it was in 1949. So one thing to point out, and this is something that we have definitely experienced this winter dominated by La Nina, is that you can have a winter pattern that's on the whole, from the start of winter to the end of winter, that's warmer than normal. When you add up all the days from, let's say, October to March. But what happens in these moderately strong La Nina events is that you have these massive Arctic outbreaks that have happened historically. So you tend to get skewed a little bit. You can have a warmer than normal winter in a La Nina, but still have Arctic outbreaks. And this is case in point. If we were to look at the winter season going from just before Halloween 1978 to the middle of March of 1979, these are the temperature anomalies on the surface for North America for that time frame. The green and the yellow show above average temperatures, the blue below average, white near average. So despite the big Arctic outbreaks and the extremely cold periods of weather that happened in the winter season of 78 and 79, on the whole, it was warmer than average. So that's something to point out and remember is that, and I'll show you a slide here in a minute that's just going to highlight that. This is what the 500 millibar low, or what the storm track was like in the 78, 79 season. But also another question came up for the winter season, spring season of 1973. 1973, there was a massive snowstorm in Montana and Wyoming that dropped 2 to 3 feet of snow on the plains. It was a devastating storm to livestock interest. That happened in late April of 1973. That was another question that came up. What was the year of 73 like? 1973, a strong La Nina. At the same time, that happened during the April 1973 timeframe. So all of you, I'm sure, who are watching this and have watched earlier podcasts about this, you notice a trend, and this is the trend. This is something to remember about La Nina winters. Moderately to strong La Ninas on the whole, from start to finish of a winter season, you're going to be warmer and drier than normal. However, these intense Arctic outbreaks are more likely during moderate to strong La Ninas. So you can be humming along, and say, boy, it's been a warm winter. Then all of a sudden, the hammer comes down. And the year of 1949, 1979 are really good examples of that. And this year, 2021, a really good example of what happened with the Arctic outbreak that we had in February. This is something else I want to highlight. When I went back and looked at the past historical weather charts, going back and looking at these La Nina years and these winter and spring storms, one thing that came out, and this is really true in that 1973 storm, is that watch out for strong to severe late spring snowstorms in moderate and strong La Ninas. This is especially true in April and late March. So that's kind of a heads up to livestock interest that while I don't see it right now on the weather maps, it's too far out. What I can tell you is what history tells us. History tells us in moderately strong La Ninas, a late season severe winter storm is on the table. At least historically, it's been there before. And as we know, these patterns sometimes come back and repeat themselves. So that'll be something stock growers will want to keep an eye on as we get to late March and early April, despite the very warm and nice weather that we have now. Thanks for listening and watching the Day Weather Podcast. Have yourself a great weekend and enjoy this great weather.